Alright, this is going to be a quick video on basic navigation in Maya 2016, Maya 2017. Alright, so first things we have to look at are what are a few of our basic hotkeys and how do they function. One of the first is our select. We have right up here in the top left corner our select tool. The hotkey for that is Q. So if I select Q, I can now come in here and select individual objects. The next one here is going to be our lasso tool and our paint selection tool on the far left. We're not going to worry about these too terrible much. Honestly, I basically don't use these. I select things individually for the most part when I'm dealing with objects, or I marquee select things. To marquee select an object, you're going to simply left click outside in the area and then drag a marquee box, and then everything inside that marquee selection will be selected. Alright, from there, once we have an object selected, we have a few manipulators that we can use. One is our W key, which is our translate tool. Translate simply means to move an object in space. So I can grab my X translation, my Z or Z, and my Y translation. I can also grab any of these boxes right here that you see, which will grab two different coordinates at the same time, or two different axes at the same time. So if I grab this one in particular, I'm moving on the Z and X at the same time, X and Y and Z or Z. Alright, next will be the rotate tool. That is E. Notice it's a different manipulator. I have intersecting circles. On this, the color of the circle is the axis that it pertains to. So the blue, its center point is rotating on the Z or Z axis. Alright, this red one, I'm rotating on the X axis, and this green one, I'm rotating on the Y axis. Alright. Next, going along that same line is scaling. That's R, hotkey R. I'm going to grab here the X, and I can scale this up uniformly in my X. Notice it's scaling in both directions. That's due to its anchor point location. The anchor point is currently in the center, so it will scale proportionally from the center in the positive and negative X. Alright, and that works again individually. You can also grab these sides and work more than one axis at the same time. And you can grab the center tool, or the center block here, and scale proportionally on all three axes. I forgot to mention, but that also works in translate. You can grab the center and translate on all three axes at once. I would typically tell you to avoid doing this because your results aren't always going to be predictable. Technically, your rotate tool can also rotate on all axes by grabbing this outer rotation, but again, I would generally advise against it because your results are less than predictable. Alright, so scale, perfectly okay to use all axes at once. Rotate and translate, it's up to you, but I would avoid it. Alright, now over here on the right hand side, we have a few windows that are good to know. If I have an object selected, we have our channel box and layer editor. This houses all of the translation, rotation, and scale and visibility. Now you can add other things to this list, but we'll get into that in a later date and time. This is the default. Basically it's recording if I have my blue thing selected here, my blue object. As I move this up in the Y or over in the X, you can see that from the center point of the world, I am now 3.688 units over in the positive X and 5.396 units up in the Y of the world. That's telling me how far away I am from this center point. I'm also rotated 90 degrees and I'm scaled 6.162 times larger than its original scale. Alright, that's all handy stuff to know, especially for animation or finding anything in the world, getting some sort of concrete measurements and so forth. Over here we also have the attribute editor. Now the attribute editor houses history of objects. For instance, I started with, when I was building this little scene here, I started with this red one. You can see right here that I started off with my polycube shape, and then I have different adjustments that I've made to it. My bevels, 2 different times I beveled it, some tweaks, some poly cuts, and over here is my original cube and blend 1, which is the material. Alright, we'll get into this more, but there's a lot of helpful information over here. Alright, modeling toolkit. Modeling toolkit is a good place to find some of our basic, most used modeling tools, as well as different selection types, whether we're dragging, pick and marquee, tweak and marquee, and camera-based selection off and on, which is an important thing to understand the difference between. That comes more in the sub-object mode, which we'll talk about more in class. Alright. Now, let's quickly talk about basic navigation inside of the world, as far as rotation, panning, and scrolling. Alright, so holding down your Alt or Option key and left click, you'll notice you get this double arrow, and this allows you to rotate around your object as you hold left click, hold Option or Alt, and drag around. Alright, now if I hold the middle mouse button and the Alt button, I can pan back and forth, up and down. Alright, and then if I hold the right click and Option, I can scroll in, scroll out by moving left and right or up and down. Alright, this is the basic way to navigate yourself around your objects inside of this world. So you have rotation, left click, middle click, pan left and right, up and down, and scroll in, scroll out with the right click. All these holding Option or Alt. Alright. You can also use your middle mouse wheel to scroll in and out just by clicking it in. Notice it's a little jumpier. Each click of your middle mouse will knock it one step further. This is a touch smoother if you use your scrolling with the right click. Basically just personal preference. Alright. I think that's good for this video, and we'll look at some more things in the next.